Ryan Mitchell had seen it all: abandoned prisons, cursed hotels, and ghost towns that looked straight out of nightmares. But none of it ever felt real, until California. Desperate to revive his dying YouTube channel, he planned a 24-hour solo challenge across the state's most haunted sites: the Queen Mary, the Winchester Mystery House, and Bodie Ghost Town. "Why you should never visit these haunted places in California," he laughed into the camera, thinking it was just a catchy title. But the moment he crossed the state border, strange things began. His GPS looped the same coordinates. The radio whispered his name. His reflection blinked a second too late. Still, he pressed on. Because for Ryan, fear meant views. What he didn't know was that in California, the ghosts don't just haunt the places you visit. They follow you home. The Queen Mary loomed over the Long Beach harbor like a sleeping beast, its massive hull slick with ocean mist, its portholes glinting faintly in the moonlight. Ryan stood at the base of the gangway, camera light glowing softly in the fog. The ship was beautiful, sure, but in that kind of way where you could feel it watching you. "All right, guys," he whispered into the mic, forcing a smile. "It's 11:47 p.m. The Queen Mary. People say this ship's more haunted than any house in California. Let's find out." The floorboards creaked beneath his boots as he entered. The air was thick, stale, as though it hadn't been breathed in decades. The hallway stretched ahead, wallpaper peeling, brass fixtures dulled by time. Somewhere deep inside, a metal door clanged. He told himself it was just the tide. Ryan had been filming abandoned places for years. He knew how to fake fear for the camera. But this was different. His breath fogged in front of him. The silence was too heavy, the kind that pressed against your chest. He followed the narrow corridor toward the pool room, a place countless guests had claimed to see something. The lady in white, the drowned child, voices echoing through the still air. The door to the pool was locked, but when he touched it, the latch clicked open on its own. His flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. The pool room was colder than the rest of the ship, unnaturally so. The empty pool gaped before him. Tiles cracked, a thin layer of fog hovering above where water used to be. He stepped closer, his camera catching glints of something wet near the drain. Then, a splash. Ryan froze. His camera light swung toward the sound. Ripples. As if something had just jumped in. But the pool was bone dry. "Hello?" His voice wavered. "Anyone here?" From the far end, a giggle, light, innocent, like a little girl playing hide and seek. The sound echoed off the tile walls circling him. "Okay," he whispered, breath quickening. "That was creepy, but we're rolling." He pointed the camera toward the diving board. The lens caught a faint shimmer, a small pale shape standing at the pool's edge. A child, maybe 7, wet hair plastered to her face. Wearing what looked like a 1930s swimsuit, she was smiling. Ryan blinked, and she was gone. The camera light sputtered. Darkness swallowed the room. When it came back on, the figure was now crouched at the edge of the pool on a closer. Her head tilted. A whisper crawled out from her direction. "I drowned here. Will you play with me?" Ryan stumbled back, the beam of light jerking wildly across the room. His bag hit the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He turned toward the exit, but the door he'd come through was gone. Just smooth, continuous wall paneling. Panic rose in his throat. He clawed at the wall, breathing hard. "That's splash!" A loud one right behind him. He spun around. The pool was now full of black water, and in it, hundreds of pale hands floated just beneath the surface, reaching upward. Ryan screamed and bolted down the corridor that had reappeared, the camera still recording, swinging wildly. He burst through a door and found himself outside again, gasping under the cold night air. The ship behind him was silent, calm, as if nothing had happened. When he checked his footage later, the pool room sequence was there, but the child wasn't, only his voice trembling. "I drowned here. Will you play with me?" And just before the clip cut out, a faint reflection appeared in the lens. A small wet hand pressed against it from the inside. Ryan drove through the empty streets of San Jose just before dawn, the Queen Mary still haunting his thoughts. He hadn't slept. The footage looped in his mind, and that voice, that handprint. His subscribers were already flooding the comment section. Fake, edited, you're insane for going there. But deep down, Ryan wasn't sure which was worse. that they didn't believe him, or that he did. By noon, the sprawling silhouette of the Winchester Mystery House rose before him, a maze of Victorian chaos built by the widow of a rifle tycoon. Doors that led to nowhere, staircases that stopped at ceilings, windows opening into walls. Sarah Winchester had built it to confuse the spirits of those killed by her husband's rifles. Now it was Ryan's next stop. "All right, guys," he said to the camera, trying to sound composed. "If the Queen Mary didn't kill me, this place might. Every hallway here leads somewhere that shouldn't exist." He stepped inside, greeted by a stale wooden scent. Dust motes floated in narrow beams of light. The air was still, unnaturally still, like the house itself was holding its breath. Ryan walked deeper, documenting the bizarre architecture. A door opened to a 2-story drop. Another led into a dead-end wall. He laughed nervously, narrating the strangeness. But as he climbed a twisting staircase, something changed. A whisper brushed past his ear. Faint, almost childlike, he froze, spinning his light around. No one. Then his camera display flickered. For a split second, a face appeared behind him, pale, hollow-eyed, framed by dark curl, then gone. Ryan backed away, heartbeat pounding. He took the next hallway to the left, but it didn't make sense. He'd just walked this way. The same mirror, the same green wallpaper, the same cracked photo on the wall. "Wait," he whispered, turning around. The corridor behind him was gone, replaced by another identical passage stretching endlessly forward. Panic tightened in his chest. Okay, Winchester logic. This is just how the place is built. But the house wasn't just confusing him, it was changing. Each door he opened led him deeper, and with each step the air grew colder. Whispers layered upon whispers until they formed words. "She built it for us. He shouldn't be here. Another one. Another soul." Ryan gripped the camera tighter, whispering to himself, "Keep moving. Keep filming." He opened another door knot and gasped. It led into the same hallway. But now everything was subtly off. The wallpaper was rotted. The lamps shattered, dust covering the floor in thick layers. As he turned, the corridor behind him sealed shut. He tried retracing his steps, but each turn took him deeper. Until finally, he reached a dead end. A single door stood there, unlike the others, polished, untouched, glowing faintly under his flashlight. He reached for the knob. The door swung open before he touched it. Inside was a small room, empty except for a rocking chair. It creaked slowly back and forth, though there was no wind. On the seat lay a framed photograph, Sarah Winchester herself. And behind her, in the faint reflection of the glass, stood Ryan. He dropped the camera. The chair stopped. The photo cracked down the middle. The whispers ceased, replaced by a low guttural knock behind him. He turned to find the hallway gone, replaced by an unending black void stretching into infinity. Something moved inside the darkness. Slow, deliberate. Ryan grabbed his camera and sprinted toward the light at the far end. As he burst through a random door, he fell, landing in the garden outside. Daylight, birds, normalcy. He stood up, gasping, his hands shaking. He turned back toward the mansion, its windows staring down like hundreds of eyes. The footage from that day was strange. Every hallway clip looped infinitely, never ending. And in the background of every loop, a faint whisper played over and over. "You shouldn't have come." The road to Bodie wound through desolate hills, the kind that looked endless under the California sun. Once a booming gold rush town, it now stood as a perfectly preserved corpse, frozen in time, wind whistling through empty streets. Ryan parked his car beside a leaning wooden sign that read, "Bodie State Historic Park, a town frozen in time." As he stepped out, the dry wind hit his face. The town stretched before him. Dozens of weather-beaten houses, saloons, and shops scattered under the pale sky. It should have felt dead, but it didn't. It felt aware. "All right, guys," Ryan said to his camera, his voice echoing through the silent street. "Locals say Bodie's cursed. They say if you take anything from this place, even a rock, the spirits follow you home. I'm not touching a damn thing." He tried to laugh, but his voice cracked slightly. He walked down the main street, boots crunching over dust and broken glass. His camera panned across rusted wagons and shattered windows. Every building seemed to lean toward him, listening. Then he saw movement. A curtain fluttered in an upstairs window, but there was no breeze. He zoomed in. The curtain stilled. A pale face appeared behind it for half a second and watching him, then gone. Okay, he muttered, forcing a smile. Probably another tourist. But the street was empty. Not a single sound except the faint hum of wind. He approached the old church at the end of the street. Its wooden door creaked open easily. Dust swirled through the dim interior, sunlight cutting through the cracks in the roof. Ryan walked slowly down the aisle, camera steady. Rows of pews lined the walls, and at the front, a pulpit. But behind it, scrawled into the faded paint, were fresh words. "You don't belong here." Ryan's throat tightened. He turned, heart hammering. In the back pew, someone sat and still silent, their hat tipped forward. He froze. "Sir?" The figure didn't move. Ryan took a cautious step forward, the camera trembling in his grip. The man's head lifted, and the skin beneath the hat wasn't skin at all. Just an empty hollow. A skull with strands of brittle hair clinging to the bone. The hat fell off as the thing slowly turned to face him, jaw cracking open in a soundless scream. Ryan bolted out of the church, sunlight blinding him. The wind howled harder now, kicking up dust in swirling shapes. As he ran through the main street, he realized something horrifying. Every window now had a face watching him. Men, women, children, all pale, hollow-eyed, frozen in the same cold stare. Some pressed their hands against the glass. Others whispered silently, "Stay. Don't leave. It's ours." Ryan stumbled, nearly dropping his camera. He reached his car, fumbling with the key, but the door wouldn't open. He looked at the rearview mirror and froze. In the reflection, he wasn't alone. A crowd of ghostly figures stood behind him, dozens of townsfolk still and expressionless. Watching, he turned around, no one there. But when he looked back into the mirror again, they were closer. Ryan screamed, jumped into the car, and slammed the accelerator. As he sped down the dirt road, dust clouding behind him, a child's voice echoed faintly through the radio. "You took something." He looked down. A small coin lay in his cup holder. He hadn't touched it. He flung it out the window. The wind went silent. For a moment, everything was still. Then his GPS glitched, flickering words across the screen. "Turn back." When Ryan reviewed the footage later, every shot of Bodie showed faces, not just in the windows, but in the reflections of his eyes. And somewhere deep in the static of his final recording, a voice whispered, soft, satisfied, and near, "Now you belong here too." By the time Ryan reached Preston Castle, the sun had already started bleeding into the horizon, casting long shadows across the crumbling structure. The castle wasn't really a castle, though. It was a reformatory, a juvenile prison built in the late 1800s, its walls thick with stories of cruelty and despair. Locals said the screams of inmates still echoed through the halls. Ryan wasn't sure if he believed that anymore, but part of him wasn't sure what he believed at all. The Queen Mary, the Winchester House, Bodie. Each place had left a mark. He hadn't slept in days. He'd started hearing whispers when no one was around. Sometimes he thought he saw faces in his own reflection. Still, he kept filming. The channel was exploding. Millions of views, endless comments. But fame wasn't what he felt. It was something closer to being watched. He parked outside the rusted iron gates and lifted the camera. "Preston Castle," he began, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. "People say this place was a home for lost boys. But judging by how many of them died here, I'd call it something else." He pushed open the gate. The sound of metal grinding against stone echoed like a warning. Inside, the halls were wide and cold, their brick walls cracked and veined with moss. The air carried a faint metallic scent, rust, dust, and something older. His flashlight caught broken chains hanging from a wall, an old mattress half buried in debris, and a line of boot prints leading down the corridor. Fresh ones. "Hello?" he called, though he didn't expect an answer. A faint clang echoed in response. He followed the sound through a narrow stairwell that spiraled down into the basement. The deeper he went, the colder it became. His breath came out in thin white streams. At the bottom, a single metal door stood ajar. Ryan pushed it open, and the beam of his flashlight landed on a row of old prison cells. Doors rusted, some half open, others welded shut. He raised his camera, speaking softly. "This is where they kept the violent ones. the ones who never left. Then the footsteps, slow, dragging, coming from the far end of the corridor. Who's there? No answer. He turned toward the sound, heart hammering. Through the bars of the last cell, a figure stood. A boy, maybe 16. Pale skin, hollow eyes, wearing torn clothes that looked decades old. "Hey," Ryan whispered. "You okay? You shouldn't be." The boy stepped forward into the light. His mouth opened, but instead of words, a low guttural whisper filled the air, layered, like dozens of voices speaking through him. He never left. None of us did. The cell door creaked open. Ryan stumbled back, tripping over debris. He pointed the flashlight at the walls, names scratched into the brick, hundreds of them. And beneath the names, fresh words carved deep, Ryan. His breath caught. "No, no, no, no!" He turned to run, but the hallway seemed to twist. The lights flickered violently. For a split second, he saw shapes. Dozens of figures reaching through the cell bars, faces twisted in anguish, whispering in a chorus that rattled the air. "Help us. Stay with us. Join us." Ryan sprinted up the stairs, his camera bouncing against his chest. Every step felt heavier, as though the air itself was holding him back. He burst through the exit and into the dying light of sunset, collapsing on the dirt outside. When he looked back, the castle was silent again. The doorway he'd come through was gone, sealed by solid brick. He checked his camera. The last few seconds of footage were distorted, filled with static and murmurs. But one whisper rose clearly above the noise. "He knows you now." Ryan froze. Behind him, in the reflection of his car window, stood the pale boy from the cell, smiling faintly. By the time Ryan reached Rosedale Cemetery in Los Angeles, the sun was long gone. The city lights shimmered in the distance, but here, among the graves, the world was silent. It was as if the city's heartbeat stopped at the cemetery gates. Ryan sat in his car for a long time, staring at the rows of headstones barely visible through the fog. His hands trembled around the camera, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was exhaustion. His eyes were bloodshot, face pale. He'd stopped uploading after Preston Castle. The voices hadn't. Sometimes he'd wake up to whispers outside his motel door. Sometimes the mirror reflected places he hadn't been. Every time he replayed his footage, new faces appeared, watching from corners behind doors, sometimes even inside the lens itself. But tonight he wasn't there to film another haunted place. He was there to end it. "Rosedale Cemetery," he muttered softly, turning the camera on. "Final stop. If you're watching this, and I don't upload again, maybe it's better that way." He stepped out. The air was heavy still. The faint hum of the city beyond the gates felt distant, unreal. The cemetery stretched endlessly, headstones glinting with dew, angels frozen in prayer. Ryan walked between the graves, flashlight in one hand, camera in the other. The beam of light skimmed over names and dates, some worn smooth with age, others fresh. Then he saw it. A small, unmarked grave at the edge of the path. A single wilted rose rested on it. Beneath the dirt, a faint shimmer, a broken lens from a camera. His own. Ryan's pulse quickened. "What the hell?" He crouched, brushing the dirt away. The lens was identical to his, same crack across the center, same brand. When he lifted it, the air shifted. The fog thickened, the ground trembled slightly, and then, a voice. "You finally made it." Ryan turned. Standing among the gravestones were faces he recognized. The drowned child from the Queen Mary, the pale woman from Winchester, the skeletal man from Bodie, the boy from Preston Castle. They stood in silence, watching. "Why me?" Ryan whispered, voice cracking. "What do you want from me?" The child tilted her head, eyes glinting with faint light. "You told our stories. You made them listen. Now we can't stop." Ryan took a step back, shaking his head. "I didn't mean, I just wanted people to know." "They know," the voices said together. "But they don't believe. And now neither do you." The ground split open behind the graves and a hollow black pit swallowing the fog. Wind roared through the cemetery, carrying fragments of whispers and laughter. The spirits stepped closer, their outlines flickering like dying film. Ryan lifted his camera one last time, pointing it at himself. His eyes were hollow, dark circles etched beneath them. "This is Ryan Mitchell," he said quietly, his voice breaking. If anyone finds this footage, don't go to these places. Don't try to prove it. Some stories aren't meant to be told. The light on his camera blinked red, recording. Behind him, the spirits reached out. The screen went black. When police found Ryan's car 2 days later, the driver's side door was open, the keys still in the ignition. His camera sat on the passenger seat, footage intact. The final frame showed the Rosedale Cemetery, but under his name, freshly carved into a headstone, were the words, "He told their stories." And beneath it, barely visible in the grain of the image, a faint reflection in the camera lens, dozens of pale faces smiling.